Welcome back, Families of Character listeners. I'm Jordan Langdon, your host, and today, oh yes, today, we are diving into one of the most delicate, emotional, and sometimes downright tricky relationships in family life. That's right, the mother and daughter-in-law relationship. Now, listen, before you clutch your pearls or start having flashbacks at the most recent family get together, just hang with me, okay? Because we're about to bring in some serious wisdom. Our guest today is no stranger to the Families of Character show. Janet Quinlan, master coach, speaker, and host of the Finding Joy in Marriage and Motherhood podcast, is back with us. Now, you might remember Janet from episode 135, where she shared 10 lessons learned about marriage. Let me tell you, that episode quickly became one of our most downloaded episodes of 2025. She has a real gift for just cutting through the noise and speaking straight to the heart with truth and grace and practical tools you can actually use. So today, Janet and I are pulling back the curtain on the most common struggles between mothers and daughters-in-law. So we're going to cover things like comparison, control, unmet expectations, poor communication, boundary blunders, and what happens when a husband and wife aren't on the same page with family dynamics. I know, yikes. We can all relate to that on some level, I'm sure. But here's the good news. Janet is going to teach us about emotional independence. And this is an absolute game changer skill that really can turn this relationship from strained and stressed to peaceful and then deeply rewarding. So we're going to talk about how to let go of heavy expectations, how to set thoughtful, respectful boundaries, and how to truly foster understanding, patience, and connection over time. So whether you're a mother-in-law, a daughter-in-law, or you're just someone listening who wants better relationships, you're going to want to stay with us until the end because Janet shares some really powerful strategies that could change not just your relationship, but the entire atmosphere of your family life. So let's get started. Welcome back to our show, Janet Quinlan.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm glad to be back.
Oh, this is wonderful. Janet, I know a lot of women listening today are wondering, what does a healthy, peaceful relationship between a mother-in-law and daughter-in-law even look like, right? Can you
Right.
paint us a picture of that?
Yeah, and unfortunately, I think it's in the minority rather than the majority. Most of the women that I coach, whether they're older women like me with daughters-in-law or younger women with mothers-in-law, they're all struggling. So I think this is a great topic. Um, what does a good relationship look like? Well, first we have to get to know each other. And sometimes we forget that part of it. When we're a daughter in law coming into the relationship, we think, well, he's in love with us, so she will naturally love us. When we're the mother in law and our son is bringing a daughter into this family, um, we often think, well, I'd like to love her. I hope to love her, but maybe we feel a little nervous about it. And a lot of that is because we have had a relationship with our son for, at least, probably 22 years, maybe even longer, a little bit shorter sometimes. And there's a rhythm to that relationship. And so a good relationship with your daughter-in-law is where you welcome her in and she feels like a daughter. Um, but we also want to be careful that we don't try to usurp the mother's role in her life because we're not her mother. We want to treat her like a daughter, and the daughter-in-law will treat the mother-in-law, like a mother as best she can. But there's this bond between our own mother that we often feel a little nervous about breaking, in a sense, not even completely, but just even stressing. So Adding to that, a good relationship is where both know boundaries. They know where they can step in and where they need to stay out. We're thoughtful about each other's needs. So, as a daughter in law, I am thoughtful that, probably my husband had a very close or just even a relationship with his mom, even if it wasn't close, it was a specific relationship, and they both kind of depend on that relationship. And as the mother in law, recognizing that he has a new woman in his life. And it's awfully difficult when two women love the same man, even though it's different ways. Love is a very strong emotion. And so just recognizing that she is a part of his life, and that we be very careful that we don't take things personally. Very often, especially in the beginning, we're just trying to figure each other out. It takes a long time to get to know someone, and I think we automatically think that we should just get along and be best friends, but that takes a long time. So recognizing that that takes time. Um, and then I think the ultimate thing is probably the most difficult thing, and that is that we have unconditional love for each other, that we recognize the other as a child of God, that we recognize that the other is in some way important to that man in the middle. I call him the man in the middle, uh, and that we just really honor that, and not try to step over that boundary.
Mm, yes. So many things are coming to mind as you talk about what a healthy relationship looks like between a mother in law and a daughter in law. And one of the things that stood out is the man in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
If you are listening and you have a mother-in-law, you're thinking, yeah, my husband, that's him. He often says, like, this is really tough. I feel caught
Mm-hmm.
between a rock and a hard spot. I don't know if I'm the rock or the hard spot,
Yeah.
but they do have this really difficult role of kind of maybe managing communication between their mom and their wife,
Mm-hmm.
and just the way you describe that man in the middle, I think that really resonates with me in the way of having compassion and empathy for our spouse too, and helping to use that man in the middle kind of idea to have compassion on my husband's mom, right?
Yeah.
And remember that he's caught.
Right. And I think for all the men who are listening, they have to remember that, they leave their mother and father, right? And they cleave to their spouse. And so, while a man has probably, the woman in his life that he's pleased the most has been his mom, probably for all those years. When you get married, uh, you still honor your mother, you still love her, but she is not the first priority anymore. The wife is the first priority. And, different relationships kind of manifest getting to know each other differently. For some, and I think I've heard marriage counselors say this, if you have a problem with your mother in law, have your husband talk to her. Maybe that works. Um, what I find that is that actually puts him more in the middle, and
Yes.
it almost eliminates a little bit more intimacy in relationship with our mother-in-law or our daughter-in-law, and just getting comfortable with communicating our needs with her, whether she's the daughter-in-law or their mother-in-law, just going right to her, because then I think we take away this idea of who do you belong to? We just are forming a new relationship. And when you form a new relationship, trust is one of the most important things in the relationship. And if we're not communicating directly, and instead putting the man there in the center, then we're never going to really, form that trust, that bond. Sometimes it might go wrong, but sometimes it might go right. And we just have to, really pray for her, and then also um, move towards her rather than putting him like in that center of things.
Hmm. That makes a lot of sense to me. In counseling, we call that triangulation, right? Where you
Mm,
introduce a third person that
yeah.
really doesn't need to be in the mix, and it causes a lot of friction between the two people that need to be communicating. So I like your advice of, going straight to your mother-in-law or your
Hmm.
daughter-in-law and having a gentle conversation. I'm sure you'll talk to us in this episode about how to go about that with some filters in mind and some
Hmm.
compassion so that defenses aren't up and you don't start off on the wrong foot and kind of eeks,
Right.
uh-oh, that
Right.
was a that that blew up, so
Yeah.
wait, you also have experience yourself with your own mother-in-law back when you first got married, right? So can you tell
Right.
us a little bit about your experience with your mother-in-law?
Yeah. She didn't like me at all from the beginning. Now, so this is almost 41 years ago, okay? It actually is 41 years ago when we started dating. Um, and I didn't have the maturity as a young woman to appreciate what Michael and I were sort of putting her through in a sense. We met in October, and 8 weeks later, we were engaged. Um, and he was calling her up and telling her that he was marrying this girl. And she was very close to Michael. He's one of five, but his father passed away when he was a senior in high school, and she really relied on him and depended on him. And so I think that, and I really do believe this now, that no woman would have been okay for her. But instead of seeing it that way, that she just had this, it was hard for her to let go of Michael. um, I made it mean something about me, right? She
Mm,
didn't like me. She, was critical of me. What's the matter with me? And I tried harder and harder. And the harder I tried, the more disappointed I was because she really didn't want a relationship with me. She just didn't. And a couple of years into our marriage, um, Michael, I was crying about it, as I frequently did. And Michael said, she's doing the best she can. And of course, that made me angrier because I thought, this can't possibly be the best that she can do when she
right.
doesn't speak to me or she's critical of me. Um, but he was really correct. And I think that this is a phrase that if we can apply almost to everybody, but especially to those around us that we want to love or that are closest to us, they are doing the best that they can. And sometimes that best doesn't look like we think our best would look. But actually, here I was not doing my best because I was being critical of her, because she was critical of me, and, all of that. So when he said that, it really put a different perspective on things for me. She had a very tough life, a life that I didn't have. And, we read in the gospel that, for those who have been given, more will be, required or asked. And really, that's what God was asking of me. Was I was given a lot of stable relationships in my life, and she wasn't. And so he was asking me to be patient and kind, and loving with her when maybe she couldn't be that with me. So um, I really remember in the beginning of our marriage saying, when I have daughters-in-law, and by the way, I have three now, and two sons-in-law. Um, I will make sure to remember this. Number one, they're doing the best they can. And then also all the things that I kind of was critical of, I won't do. And so,
Yes.
it was very helpful in a way. So,
Yes. Well, just having that lens and accepting that, truth from your husband, I think is a
mhm,
beautiful way to get started in marriage, is just to say, remind ourselves that this woman is doing the best she has with the resources
mhm,
that she has access to. And in your case, wow, 8 weeks she kind of knew of you, and then all of a sudden you're going to be the love of his life. And
yeah,
she's going, he's going to leave me and cleave to her. And
Mhm.
I don't even quite know this woman, And
Yeah,
so having some understanding and compassion definitely changes that filter with which we kind of put their words and their behavior through and can definitely help. Thank you for
yeah,
sharing that.
yeah. There's a term in coaching that we call empathetic curiosity. And
Mm,
that is when we look at someone with empathy for who they are and what they're going through, but we're curious about, okay, why do they act the way they're acting? Um, Rather than judgment and, kind of being closed off. And so if women can look at each other, whether they're what side of the man they're on, um, and have empathetic curiosity for the other woman, I think that a lot of problems in the in-law relationship will be resolved because we won't make things mean something to us that they don't necessarily mean.
mm,
Um, and Yeah, so I just think that that's important to look at the other person with eyes of empathy and curiosity.
mm. I love that. Just a spirit of like, where is this coming from for them
Hmm.
versus why is she attacking me or making it personal to us.
Yeah.
I think that's a very common mistake in this dynamic between a mother-in-law and daughter-in-law is, oh, this is offensive. She
Hmm.
meant to hurt me. She's out to just get me. This, right?
Hmm.
We do what I call MSUing. We make stuff up or making stuff
Hmm.
up, right?
Hmm.
And that always goes poorly
Yeah.
when we assign meaning to somebody's words that are personally offensive to us. And so I like the spirit of curiosity and even asking for clarification.
Hmm.
The way you said that really kind of hurt my feelings. Can you
Yeah.
tell me what you meant by that? Because
Yeah.
I'm over here in my head kind of making things up and I'm probably way overdoing it, but would you mind explaining, what you really meant by that? I think that can be a healthy way to avoid that making stuff up and get back to what you talked about, the empathetic curiosity.
Yeah. And I also think that, it helps us. I mean, I think you have to have a lot of courage to do that. Um, but this is hopefully a long game, right? You get married,
Yes.
just married for life. And so, if we start just like tucking resentments under the rug and we just don't really, get clarity, um, then it just builds and builds and builds. And I think, one of the things that we both struggle with is, and I know I for sure did, was having certain expectations of what my mother-in-law would look like, and or what my daughters-in-law would look like. Um, and so my three daughters-in-law couldn't be more different than I am. I'm like, wait a minute,
Okay.
what?
Right.
um, and I'm very, very close to all my children. So it's not because, their husbands didn't love me or anything. I mean, we have very close relationships, but I can see how each of those women is perfect for that son.
Mm,
God knew exactly what they needed. And I think our initial response is, oh, why did he pick her? And that's a wrong pick. That's a bad pick. And, because they're not like us. But God knows what he's doing. And
yes.
so, and they're lovely. And we're 10, 11 years now into one of the relationships, and then about uh, 11, 10, and 3. And I can really see how those women are challenging my sons to be the best that they can be, and loving them in ways that they need to be loved, and balancing them in ways. So we really have to be careful about expectations. So I had expectations of a mother in law, that we would lunch together when we saw each other, and we would just sit and chat, and we'd have the same things in common. Um, Very similar to my mom with her daughters-in-law. And that just wasn't my mother-in-law. She's passed, but she was kind of cold, very New England type. Um, not at all interested in feelings. And I was an education major. I was all about feelings.
Yes.
So, and we really had nothing in common. And, silly things like, and I'm just going to say this because I just thought of it, so maybe it's something that someone else will be okay with. So, like the very first Christmas that we met, she bought me a size smaller than I wore. And it was a small. I'm like, I didn't even wear a small when I was a junior in high school.
Oh, no. Yeah.
So, but it's so dumb. I made it mean, oh, she thinks I'm fat. And I was not fat. And so we have to just not apply all kinds of emotions and stories to what they do or say. We have to be really careful about that.
Oh, yes. And I can only imagine that, just like,
Yeah.
how do I respond to the size small? Thank you, kind of, with this
Yeah,
like
kind of.
sneer.
Well, that's what Michael said. He's like, why aren't you complimenting? I'm like, come on, really? So anyway, yeah. But
These are
we
real
grow up.
things. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. That's right. But these are real experiences that you
Mm-hmm.
have, or the way that someone looks at you, at the dinner table when you're all at a holiday gathering and you just make something mean something about
Mm-hmm.
that. And so, um, yeah, expectations are a thing, right? When
Yeah,
you
for
say,
sure.
I want it to be like this, and then the reality is different, that's just really hard to reconcile inside the difference between what you want and what's happening. And so I think
Yeah.
we have to constantly be turning this sort of dial of expectations back to, remember, she's doing the best she can with the resources she's got and the background that she brings to this relationship. And so I'm going to try to kind of neutralize the expectation and receive,
Mm-hmm.
charitably whatever she's capable of giving me.
Yeah, and I want to dive deeper just for a minute on that because we just finished with went through the holiday seasons, and there's a huge expectations about what happens in the holidays. And as a mother-in-law, I want to encourage all mothers-in-law that their children, whether it's their daughter or their sons, as adults, they get to decide what they want to do.
Mm.
I think that we have this big problem where there is this expectation that you keep coming around to the mother's house, that you show up at Christmas, that you show up at Easter, that you're always there. You bring your wife, you bring your kids, but you better be there. And I personally think that creates so much division in a family. Um, that the one day they have to be there one day to prove that they love you. I mean, first of all, you've got all year to show that you love each other, and second of all, what if you had your family celebration on a different day? Because don't forget, as we talked about, as the husband leaves, both of them leave their family of origin to create a new family that has priority. They get to decide how they want to celebrate those big occasions in their family life. um, I was talking to a client, oh gosh, a couple of years ago, and it happened to be after Christmas. And I said, how was your Christmas? And she said, well, I heard your podcast about traditions. And she said, you know what our tradition is? On Christmas Day, we're in the car driving from place to place. She said, the kids are tired, they're crabby, and we never get what we want as a family. And I thought, that is a real pity. That's
Mm.
awful. So I'm going to offer this to mothers-in-law. Here's what we do for Christmas anyway. We haven't gotten to a place with Easter or Thanksgiving, but for Christmas, we don't celebrate Christmas. I mean, we do celebrate Christmas on Christmas Day, but not the whole family. So if you're single, if one of my kids are single, they're coming over. Michael and I will have a meal with them, my mom. But if you're married, I tell them, you do what you want to do for Christmas. So two things. One, they get to decide. And two, if they have a mother-in-law who's not, you know, so I don't know if you want to say gracious, but who demands that they be at her house, they can decide if they want to do that, and they don't have to choose. But for me and for our family, we always celebrate Christmas on Feast of the Holy Family, which is just the next Sunday. And so everybody comes over, and that's when we celebrate our Christmas. And I really think that we have to think outside the box on how we do major family celebrations so that there isn't a choice that has to be made. Feelings aren't hurt. We just get proactive in deciding how can we do this so you get to start your little family and have your traditions, and we still get to see each other at, a really great holiday time. So
Hmm.
I think
Thank
that's,
you for
yeah.
sharing that from your perspective too of being a mother-in-law and having
Hmm.
grown children with their own families. I think that's great advice. I was just talking to a woman coming out of church the other day, and she was talking about her most recent holiday. She was so excited. All of my kids and all of their kids came back, and I said, "Oh my goodness, what a gift that is to you."
Hmm.
I said, "I know what it takes to schlep your kids around, 5 hours in the car or whatever. And that's a lot, and bringing all your stuff and gifts and things." And she said, "I hope it never ends. Never. I hope it never
Hmm.
ends." And there was this clutching of, I could tell that this was something so important to her.
Hmm.
Um, but I like what you said, like, let your child decide what they want to do. Maybe some of your kids decide that is worth it for them to
Yeah.
make the trip
Yeah.
and come and bring all the kids. But to
Hmm.
give permission to your daughter in law and your son is such a beautiful thing,
Yeah.
because it is a lot, And I think, there's sort of a speaking out of both sides of our mouth if we believe as a mother in law that it is important for our children, biblically based, to
Hmm.
leave their father and mother and cleave to their bride. But then we're saying, but not in this instance.
Yes, right. Not on Christmas Day.
Right. I reign here and you need to
Yeah.
prioritize me or us over
Yeah.
your spouse. It's like, oh, but I thought we were supposed to leave and cleave, and now I'm
Right.
mixing that up. So thank you for
Yeah.
giving that advice. I think that's permission is a huge thing that we seek as daughters-in-law,
Hmm. Hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So
Another thing
much.
that, yeah, I think this kind of goes along with it are boundaries. Um, you know, when we have expectations, we sometimes lose the boundary. And so, what does that mean? It means that, if a mother in law um, just wants to see the kids and she just pops over and knocks on the door and opens the door, and, you know, um, we just have to recognize that we are separate families. Separate, we're connected still, but separate in the way we live our lives. And for the that's probably the biggest thing that many of the daughters-in-law, express frustration about, is that the mother-in-law has there's no boundaries. She wants to be in the delivery room. She wants to be, yeah, I know it's a thing now. I'm
Oh,
like,
wow.
I didn't even want to be in delivery. I know my husband didn't want to be,
Right.
but it's a thing now. And many will come over and you know um, maybe start cleaning up or whatever without permission, right? Or just show up without permission. And so what does it mean to create a boundary? Well, first of all, we have to get to a place where we recognize that we're doing it from a sense of calm and love, um, to enhance the relationship, not to punish her. That's really important. um,
Mhm.
and then we communicate it clearly. So, for instance, if the mother-in-law shows up and rings the bell, and you feel like I can't just turn her away, you can when you say to her, "Here's the thing: when I'm home with the kids, I'm really not ready for visitors. So if you would like to come, just call me or text me, ask, and I'll let you know if it's available. But if you come to the door without having asked or texted or whatever, I won't answer the door. It's just the boundary that I'm going to create. I love you. I want you to see the kids, but I also have a life and I have a schedule, and I want to make sure that we're doing the things that we need to do for our family. But also, we want you to know that we want you to see the kids. We just need some advanced warning." So that would be a boundary,
Mm.
as opposed to, and I've heard this from some mothers-in-law about their daughter-in-law, um, who just say, "We're not going to see you again." It's just not happening. There's no understanding as to why, what did I do wrong, where has this gone? That's not a boundary. That's a punishment.
That's right.
Yeah. So we want to be really clear with boundaries. And I think to the men, they have to facilitate that boundary. They have to, for their wives, they have to really get on the same page, always on the same page with dealing with both of the mothers, her
Mm-hmm.
mother, his mother. Um, and then for his mom, helping her understand why his wife has created the boundary. And if it's a boundary that's really not fair, then have a conversation with his wife and say, okay, why are we doing this? Is there a different way that we can, facilitate the end without the punishment aspect of it?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's just something that you have to work through. But boundaries
Yes.
are really important.
They are. I want to underscore that. Boundaries are really important. And when you were giving the example of the mother in law showing up at the door and just being very specific about, okay, this is an issue of you showing up without advance notice. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I love you, and this is just an incident. This isn't an overall, judgment of you as a person, but here's exactly what I'm asking for. Being
Mm-hmm.
specific about that is so crucial to this dynamic because,
Mm-hmm.
like you said, you could blow it up and just say, in my mind, using that kind of all or nothing thinking where you're saying, she always shows up without, you know, advanced warning. I'm sick of this. We're not seeing her again. Instead, just addressing things as they come up in the moment, being specific and sticking to the facts. That example you gave was very clear. That you're sticking to the facts. Here's what just happened. Here's what I would like for you to do. I love you, and let's see if we can make this work next time.
Yeah. Yeah. Another place where I think a lot of people overstep boundaries are gift giving. So at Christmas time, lots of mothers in law love to just pour their love through gift giving. But a lot of daughters in law, especially in this age of minimalism, they don't want all the stuff. And so if your daughter in law says to you, one gift, please, there's probably nothing more that you can do to show your daughter in law that you love her than give one gift. That
Mm-hmm.
shows that you respect her, you respect her judgment, you respect who she is as a mother. And then also for the daughters in law, if you still get 10 gifts, you should feel the freedom to say to the kids, what do you want? And the rest we'll give to charity. You don't have the obligation to keep what, if someone has gone past the boundaries, you don't have the obligation to keep it. So that's a big thing is the amount of gifts that people give. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so, I think that we have to remember that as women, we have different, we call them love languages, right? Different ways that we show love. We're just different personalities. Like I mentioned about my daughters-in-law, never occurred to me that my sons would choose the daughters that they chose. I thought they would choose like me. And so we have to kind of keep reminding ourselves of that she's different and that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
She, if she does something that we would be like, what the heck? We just have to be like, well, that's who she is. That's okay. She's different. But when
That's
we
right.
go into that, that like rabbit hole of, oh my gosh, I can't believe she did that. And what is she thinking? And, what is she trying to prove? And what is she saying about me? It's like that, that spiral thinking that never goes well because it creates those feelings, whether they're anger or disappointment or frustration or whatever, they're always negative feelings. And then when we have those negative feelings, we show up in ways that we don't really want to show up. Um, and so, I think that probably is maybe the biggest message I would like to offer to people is ask yourself, who do you want to be in this relationship? No matter what she does, whether it's the mother-in-law or daughter-in-law, who do you want to be in this relationship? And, maybe even write down want to be patient. I want to be understanding. I want to have clear boundaries. I mean, it doesn't mean that you have to, be the doormat, but who is God calling you to be as a woman to this other woman? And then kind of keep going back to that. What do you want to think about her? And when a negative thought comes up, how can you change it so it's a thought that is positive that you can still believe? When she gives 10 gifts and you told her one gift, a million times, your thought could be, she disrespects me because she keeps giving 10 gifts, right? But what if you change that? What if you reframe that to, that's her love language. That's how she shows her love. It's okay. I don't have to keep it. I don't have to get angry about it. It's just who she is.
Yes. Oh, that just right at the beginning when you said, oh, she's giving 10 gifts. Here she's doing this again. I've told her a million times. I kind of felt this tension inside, like, yeah, yeah. And then when you said, this is who she is. This is how she expresses love. This is one of her love languages. Like gift giving is a thing that brings her joy. Well, then I can say, okay, and I also have the choice of sifting through these with my kids and saying, okay, which one are we going to keep and which one could we bless other people with because we're not bringing all these into the home. But that's
Yeah.
such a difference. The
Yeah.
reframe makes such a difference because, man, if you stick with that first train of thought, we are not doing gifts, Christmas with your mother again. I can hear that,
Yeah.
happening and just going down this whole, like, let's just cut off this relationship. It's too much to deal with versus that empathetic curiosity. Oh, yeah, she is a gift giver. This is what brings her joy. And instead of cutting her off from that, we're just going to do with, these gifts what we want once we get back home, and it'll be okay.
Yeah. Yeah. It will be okay. The world will not
Yes,
come to an end. You'll
that's
just
right.
figure it out. You may even pack up 9 of them and put them away. And in the middle of the summer, when the kids are making you crazy, you pull out one of those gifts if you want,
Yes. Say, God
something
bless
new.
grandma.
Yeah. Right. Right. And then going back to that man in the middle, I think there's another point that I wanted to just bring up that um, as his wife, we have to be very sensitive to the place that he is in. That means that we don't complain to him all the time about her. We don't, get angry with him, maybe for not, stepping up. I mean, there was an episode that Michael's mother, spoke to me really poorly and said some really harsh things. And this is in the very beginning of our relationship and marriage, and Michael didn't say anything. I was so angry. I felt betrayed by my husband. But what we have to remember is he's learning too. He's learning a very difficult task of keeping 2 women happy, 2
Oof.
probably very different women. And we have to have empathy for him. Now, that doesn't mean that, we don't bring up, maybe big issues and say, how can we resolve this? Like the 2 of us. But we don't say, okay, yep, your mom did it again as you get in the car, leaving her house, she's off, and on the flip side, as a mother-in-law, we don't call him up. We don't call our son up and say, what on earth is wrong with your wife? She can't control the kids. They're always crying, whatever it is. He's not the place for that. It's
Mhm.
unfair to him, actually. And so that's where we get back into the reframing rather than just like making him the punching bag, and just vomiting all of our unhappiness or our anger or disappointment or unmet expectations on him. That's not his problem. We have to figure out how to reframe so that we're at peace. And that goes back to the emotional regulation. So, kind of covering everything, or maybe it's actually supporting everything. I think it's probably supporting everything, is taking the responsibility as mature women, whether we're the daughter-in-law or mother-in-law, to take responsibility for our own emotions. We just because someone acts some way doesn't mean that we have to make it mean something negative. We can choose. Goes back to the previous example. We can choose whatever we want to think about it. And we can't depend on her to make us happy. I was depending on my mother-in-law to make me feel like I was a good daughter-in-law. And she didn't do it. She couldn't do it.
Right. Chronic
And so,
disappointment.
exactly. And so I was very unhappy. But when we take control of our own emotions, it doesn't matter what other people do because we make the decision, well, that's who they are, and I choose not to be upset about it. And we live in this world where emotions drive everything. Um, Emotions are important, but they're not the most important. I mean, we need to think. We need to be more conscious of how we're thinking because it's those thoughts that create those feelings. We don't even realize that. We just think we're just feeling all the time. And so, with regards to our in-law, you know, decide I'm not going to I'm not going to give over, basically surrender my emotions, my emotional regulation, my happiness to someone that, to anybody else, really anyone else. I'm going to
Right.
take responsibility for my emotions.
Yes, I fully agree with you, and that I think sometimes in this relationship that can be so delicate and just hard to navigate, especially right when you get married. You know, there can be the like, okay, I'm setting this boundary, and if you don't uphold this boundary, and just going down this rabbit hole, if this doesn't happen, then this is what I'm going to do to you. And again,
Mm-hmm.
you're giving all your power and control over to the other person versus just politely setting a boundary and then allowing them to respond or react in whatever way they respond or react. But that also doesn't mean we have to then play off of their reaction and keep
Right.
this negativity going. We can politely step away or say, I can tell you're really upset right now,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm just going to need a little time out. But I think, we can call each other tomorrow once we've slept on this and return to the conversation. But yeah,
Yeah, I think what you said was good. We don't walk into a relationship and start setting boundaries. And I think a lot of people do that.
yes,
Um, let's just let people live for a little bit and understand each other. And again, I think I said it in the very beginning, it takes time. It takes time to get to know someone. It takes time to feel comfortable with it. I mean, like years. It takes years.
yes.
Why do we think it doesn't? It
I
just
know.
does.
If you're listening to this and you're thinking, okay, Janet and Jordan, you have no idea what's going on over here in my
Mm,
relationship with my daughter-in-law or my mother-in-law. Like it's way different. It's you can't rescue this. This is just, pure hell. But I just want to encourage you that there's always hope,
hmm
and it might not be quite as wrecked as you have built up in your mind, even though it feels really heavy or distant or totally, separate. There's always a chance of reconciliation in any relationship. And personally, one of the things that I've used in my relationship with my mother-in-law is like just self-deprecating humor every
hmm
once in a while and just going, you know what? That probably was totally my fault. I just we've never been on vacation with you overseas,
hmm
so uh, this is a new, even though my husband and I've been married 20 years, just a couple years ago, we went to Greece with our in-laws, for 2 weeks. And so there was a lot of little incidences where you're like, why is this happening? And it's like, hello, because we've never traveled and been on a
Yeah.
bus together for days or whatever. And so
Yeah.
this is just new. This is just
Yeah.
new territory. And we're all trying to navigate it and kind of there can be a feeling of like walking on eggshells sometime, like, oh, is that
Mhm.
going to upset her or is that going to upset? And my mother in law feels the same way. I can tell. Like, there's this little trepidation, like, should I ask her if it's okay if we go to this certain restaurant? So
Mhm.
there's a
Mhm.
sensitivity happening. And I think if both of you can just go, okay, this is new. This takes time. We've never been here before. Again, it's that empathy, that compassion, and it changes the lens through which you end up feeling about whatever words are exchanged.
Yeah. Yeah. And you go back to the we're different. We're just different.
Yeah.
It's interesting. You were on your. I was thinking you of 2 weeks of in Greece with in-laws, and I wondered. did you have any kind of conflicts with your husband during that time? I bet you did. I mean, I
Oh,
would have, right?
oh, I'm
You're
sure.
tired and yeah, but we make it mean more when it's about her, right?
Yes. Why do we do this?
I
And
don't know. I don't know. In every relationship, we're going to have conflict of some kind for, some more than others. And I do think I've heard from women, as I said, on both sides, maybe ends of the spectrum, where I think we throw around this term toxic. We have a toxic daughter-in-law, I have a toxic mother-in-law. So I'm not, I mean, I know that there's a definition for it, but I would be very, very careful about
Mhm.
identifying and labeling a toxic mother-in-law or a toxic daughter-in-law, because as soon as you label them that, it's suddenly like, and I can't do anything about it. That's just who
Yes.
she is, right? So really, there's this saying, the mind finds what it seeks. And I think that we have to look more in our relationships, all of our relationships, really, but especially probably with our in law relationship. We have to look for the ways in which they are kind, look for the ways in which they are generous. Because if we're looking for the ways in which they are not, we're going to find them and we're going to focus on them. The brain loves the negative, and we're just going to focus on that all the time. And it's going to feel like, we're going to be defeated. This will never be good. But if we can find, like when Michael said that, she's doing the best she can, I started looking at some of the things that she did do, that was just the best that she could do, rather than focusing on that negative all the time.
That is so important. And that is a real practical tool. If you're
Mm-hmm.
listening, go on the hunt, challenge
Mm-hmm.
yourself, go on the hunt for something that your mother in law or daughter in law does well. And maybe if you're experiencing a strained relationship with your mother in law or daughter in law, challenge yourself to write down two things every morning when you first wake up that is positive about the other person, because you will find that, like Janet, you said, the mind will find what it's seeking or what it's
Mm-hmm.
looking after. And so
Mm-hmm.
if you train your mind even with a short journal prompt, positives about my mother-in-law or positives about my daughter-in-law, you're going to start noticing the little things that are beautiful about her.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to circle back to what you said before about talking to your husband about their mother, or, even mother in laws talking to their husbands about their daughter in law.
Mm-hmm.
That really, it not only puts the man in a really tough spot, but it's really kind of an attempt to persuade the other person
Mm-hmm.
that they're really kind of bad, or
Yeah.
this isn't good and you should be equally as upset as I am. You know, we should share the same view on how rough this really is.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just not fair to really put all of um, your perceptions on another person and then sort of work to convince them to look at that person in the same way, right? We would
Yeah.
never want that to happen to
No,
us.
we don't. But we want an ally, right? When we
Yeah.
when we think something negative of someone, we want an ally. And you're right. It's unfair, because as soon as we label them, brand them something, and then we get other people to think the same thing, that poor person, whether it's the daughter or the mother-in-law, shouldn't have a chance. And for mothers-in-law, I would really encourage you to be patient. Be patient with this woman. She's a girl in your mind, probably, right? She's young and whatever. Um, and she has completely probably different ideas of what I mean, my daughters are all about, making sure everything is healthy, and I don't even know the terminology that they use for the milk that they get and all of that. And I'm like, my kids grew up on Captain Crunch. So, it's, it's understanding. That's okay. That's who they are. Things have evolved. It's been, 40 years, 35 years. And so let them be let them experience things. Let them try things without jumping in and saying, you really don't want to do that. That's really not going to work. Support them just by loving them. It doesn't mean you have to say anything, and you don't have to solve all their problems. That's,
Hmm.
we because we think we have the wisdom. And we do have the wisdom, but they have to gain it just like we had to gain it. We had to learn things through trial and error, and they do too. And we just need to love them through the learning.
Mm, I love that advice. And I think just to piggyback off of that, even asking, like, would you mind if I gave you a tip
Hmm.
about tantruming? Right.
Hmm.
And then respect if they say, no,
Yeah.
I'm not up for advice right now. I can't handle that right now. Maybe
Hmm.
another day. Okay, no problem. But I
Yeah.
think both parties can ask permission, right? Would it be okay when I come visit if I bring a lasagna? That's what my
Yeah.
mother-in-law says. And I'm like,
Oh.
yes, this would be great.
Hmm.
And sometimes I say, I've already got tons of groceries from
Hmm.
Costco and I've got meals planned out. Thank you so much. But next time I'll take you up on the offer,
Yeah.
right? So just asking and then honoring the person's boundary too.
Yeah. Yeah. And just going back to boundaries, kind of as we kind of wrap it up a little bit. We we must remember that we are two separate families united, but we're separate. And I think that probably is the biggest expectation that trips everyone up. As daughters in law, we feel like we should make her happy by doing what she's expecting or what she wants, which only causes resentment in us. And as the mother in law, we forget that she's starting a new family. And we need to give her that space and the freedom that's rightfully hers to start that new family. So I think probably the biggest thing, and we always leave it to the end because everybody wants practical, 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 right? But we need to pray more for our mother in law or our daughter in law. Um, and you will find, I found it in my life that when I pray for someone, the resentments just go away. Not sometimes it takes a while, depending on how deep the resentment is, but it will go away. And the more we pray for someone, the more actually we fall in love with them because we
Mhm.
want what's best for them. And sometimes I have found when I'm praying for someone, um, I see where I can do better. And that's important as part of our prayer. So I think both should be praying for each other. And then let's pray for that man in the middle.
Yes, let's pray for that man in the middle as
Yeah.
well. I love that. And yes, that is something that we can do that is not scary. It's not stepping out
Mm.
in a new assertive way right off the bat, but just praying, Lord, soften my heart towards this
Mhm.
woman. Lord, help me and my husband be on the same page in setting healthy boundaries and developing our own family. Help me to respect my daughter in law's decisions
Mhm.
around the holidays and to support them truly leaving the home and cleaving to one another, right? I mean,
Yeah.
simple prayers that make a huge difference. So, Janet, as always, you've given us such hope and practical wisdom. And I just want to thank you again for coming on our show.
Oh, thank you.
Tell
I'm so,
us,
yeah.
yeah, tell us a little bit about. I mean, you've coached women in this dynamic, and you have a course for both mothers and daughters that can log in and take your digital course that
Mhm.
is more expansive on this relationship, right?
Right. Yeah. So I took all of the knowledge of being a daughter in law, a mother in law, and then all the people that I coach and the things that they deal with. And I kind of sifted it down to a few main points. And so it's called the mother in law, daughter in law dynamic. And it's about creating just a healthy relationship. So I did create it for both. And actually, I have had a mother-in-law and daughter-in-law, the pair come in and take the course together. And so it was very interesting. I think they were very open to each other, which I thought was just so beautiful. But yeah, so it's a course about how to have, emotional independence from each other, um, how to let go of expectations, how to set those thoughtful boundaries, how to have effective communication skills so that you're connecting rather than disconnecting, and then really focusing on your husband or your son and how to not make it hard on him. So, yeah, it's been pretty successful. People have found it to be very helpful. And they can just go to janetquinlan.com. It's if you scroll down the homepage, it's at the bottom of the page. You can find it there.
That's janetquinlan.com. We have that linked in our show notes. So
Okay,
be
thank
sure
you.
to sift through our show notes, click on that link, and you will see that course offered on her website. I think this would be a really cool gift to give like your sister if she's getting married, right?
Yeah.
Maybe not your daughter-in-law if she's marrying your son. That might be an overstep at the
That
boundaries
might
to gift her
be.
that. But you might
But
even
you know,
say
to be
if
honest,
you're
no, but truthfully, the mother-in-law, this pair that came in, she paid for both of them.
oh,
So
that's fun.
yeah, it was really lovely. And I asked the daughter-in-law, because I needed to understand if there was conflict between them, what was going on, because
Right.
I did a coaching with them, and she's like, no, 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 we're both very open. We both know we need help, and we're good. I'm like, wow, that's wonderful and mature. So yeah.
That is fantastic. If the earlier you can get this course, the better.
Mhm.
Think about it if you have children who are, in college and are dating, that you keep this in your back pocket and maybe even purchase it and go through it yourself. And then think of other people you could refer to this digital course. I just think this is something every single married couple can benefit from. And so, why not jump in, dive in, check it out, be open, and have that curiosity to learn something new and really implement some new skills. So, if you're listening today, and you're again just kind of questioning, just remember that no matter how rocky things may feel now, change is absolutely possible. And with emotional independence, grace, and a little intentional effort, you can build this kind of bridge that lasts in your family for generations, right? You can model healthy relationship with your mother-in-law, which your kids will witness and be able to pass on for generations to come. So I think it's a absolutely worthwhile effort to dive in, invest some money, and take the course and see how your relationships can change. Janet, thanks again for coming on the show.
You're
And
welcome. Thank you for having me.
yes, absolutely. JanetQuinlan.com. And guys, I will catch you on another episode of our show real soon. Please be sure to share this episode with your spouse first and foremost, and then kick this out to everybody in your circle. This is a common issue that needs to be addressed, and there's so much great fruit that can come from it. So please share this episode with people in your circle. Take care, and we'll catch you on another episode real soon.